On today's show, it's the beginner's guide to band merch.
Let's load up and go shopping, and this is 15-Minute Music Marketing.
Welcome to 15-Minute Music Marketing, the show for independent artists and DIY musicians who want to get better at marketing their music.
Hi, I'm Greg.
Hello, I'm Sheldon, and this is 50-Minute Music Marketing, the show for independent artists and DIY musicians who want to market their music, but they're time poor. They've not got a lot of time, so we've got 15 minutes to hopefully improve,
educate,
and entertain. And in this episode, Greg, this one's a two-parter. Back in the old days, this would have been one episode, but now splitting it, fragmenting it into two. We're talking about band merch.
The thing that's usually typically overpriced and only available as gigs.
Possibly. We're going to look at various different ways you might be able to sell it in the next episode. This first episode is all about groundwork. It's all about talking about maybe the logistics, everything to do surrounding getting started. So this episode is for you if you're an artist, a DIY musician who's thought about selling band merch and merchandise, but has never gotten round to it, and hate maybe if you've previously dipped your toes in the waters before, as someone myself who sold a lot of band merch over the years, and even last Saturday, at the time of recording this particular episode, I was on the stall selling it, a pre-gig and post-gig. I think I've got many years' experience in trying to sell it, but the first episode, we're going to lay some groundwork.
So we're going to avoid the viewers and listeners going out buying 200 T-shirts and putting one record on Spotify, and then they have a garage full of T-shirts that nobody buys.
Yes.
Right.
So we're laying some foundations today. Okay.
So
yep.
The first question I ask to help the viewers and listeners out is, why should bands have a merch strategy? Why shouldn't I just put something on DistroKid and buy a load of T-shirts?
Well, as we've seen before, just the very matter of streaming. So a lot of independent artists don't have much, or indeed anything in the way of merch. And as we've seen from previous episodes of this particular podcast/show, if you're relying solely on streaming for your music revenue, it's quite often difficult to achieve a reasonable sum to make any sort of money. But in terms of selling merchandise is generally a profitable affair, which can bring you in a reasonably significant amount of money. And if you're not selling merch, Greg, you're leaving money on the table. So one of the ways I like to frame it, and I've heard some people say this, is that all you people out there listening in podcast /YouTube land, you're not in the music business, you're in the T-shirt business.
You're in the merch business.
You're in the merch business, and band merch is something that people want. We live in an intangible digital world where people don't necessarily get round to owning a lot of things. However, when it comes to music and when it comes to concerts, people do like physical, tangible items that link themselves as people to the artists and musicians that they love. So
prior to this, you said, how many people buy vinyl and don't actually listen to it?
I think, again, this is anecdotal and off the top of my head, it's about 20% of people who buy vinyl records never get round to sort of playing it. They're either buying it as a means of support to the artist in question, or they're buying it just because it looks nice and it's nice to feel and nice to hold, and they'll just listen to it digitally, off the Spotify.
And I'm sure cassettes are pretty much the same in terms of, because cassette sales have improved. So basically, what we're saying here is that music on those formats are merch rather than a portal to listening to the music, aren't they?
Yes, very much so. If you're out there, if you're playing live, people will want to buy merchandise at that show because it's a souvenir of that particular occasion. It's only going to happen the once, so people want to, I'm sure you've got T-shirts, Greg, that you've bought at concerts, at events, and whenever you're going through your cupboards or your drawers, you'll see it and it's like, oh, I remember that particular night. So again, they are sort of souvenirs as well as potentially
Mementos.
practical items. So if you're an artist, you're releasing music, you should have a strategy of creating awareness by releasing music, making content around that music. You should have a marketing budget so people get to see that content, to hear that music. You should then try and build an engaged community around that music. And once you've got an engaged community, then you can make them offers. That offer could be just a gig ticket. It could be selling them merchandise online, or it could well be combining both the two of them, selling them merchandise at a gig. That's my strategy anyway.
Okay.
And it works.
Yeah, trust me, I've actually sold a lot. Well, I've worked for you selling the merch.
Yes, I've kept you busy on Saturday evenings selling T-shirts. Have you got that in a medium?
No. So, okay, next question. At what level, musician, do you have to be at before you actually start selling merch? Is there a point, or do you just kind of just go in bold, jump in the deep end?
Well, I wouldn't advise anybody to jump in the deep end if you're going to be spending a lot of money, but you do, I would say, well, it is a $50,000 question. You have to have a modest audience, potentially on one or several sort of platforms. People that you can necessarily contact, even if you necessarily have to pay to do that. So maybe a minimum of 500 people on popular social platforms. Ideally, maybe 1,000 to 2,000. I would say, do you, as an artist, play live once or twice a month? I would then say that if you are playing to that sort of level of frequency, you should be encountering enough people live and in person to which you can sell items of merchandise to, I would say.
Can I just chuck a curveball here?
Curveball away.
Etsy.
What about Etsy?
Well, in theory, could they not just literally pre-sell a T-shirt without making it, and then literally... So in terms of, instead of having to buy the stock and wait, you're almost selling it on a supply and demand and then supply.
You're talking about print on demand, Greg.
Yes, I am.
Right. Okay. Well, that's next week.
Oh, is it? Okay. All right. Sorry, I didn't know.
That's quite all right.
So initially, then minimum 500, ideally 1,000 to 2,000 across several platforms.
Yeah, one or two gigs a month. You should have enough people within that audience to serve merchandise.
Because I guess you're not going to be going out big right from the start. You might only buy a dozen T-shirts. I mean, you're going to have to obviously give an idea of the figures.
Again, it's in the next episode. It's good. It's good you're getting there. You're finding your way naturally to these topics. Okay,
right, that's cool. All right, so what things should I be thinking about that might not be apparent if I've never made any merch before, Sheldon?
Right, well, here we go. Here's some things you need to think about. Number one, you're going to need some money. You're essentially a business that is buying some stock. So you're going to need money to buy that stock. What you'll then also encounter is cash flow difficulties, because you've just spent a lot of money on a load of stock. You probably bought it in bulk to whatever, it might be 50 CDs, could be 50 T-shirts, but you're only going to be getting the money back for that in dribs and drabs. So you've already, like businesses, encountered a cash flow difficulty. There's not a lot you can do about that, really. But you have to make sure that you have got enough money in the first instance to invest in that particular stock.
But hopefully, the thought of them just having stock in their living rooms will be incentive to do something so they're not tripping over it.
Yes, so you could have your nearest and dearest saying, I'm sick of living with these boxes of T-shirts. You're going to need to have to do something with them. Which actually brings us on to point two rather nicely. You're going to need somewhere to store all this. If it's a box of CDs, a box of 100 CDs isn't going to be larger than maybe 30 centimetres by... No, 50 centimetres by 50
You can put that in a cupboard.
You can put that in a cupboard. However, if you're buying hoodies in bulk, like I do, goodness me, those boxes take up a massive amount of space. So again, at the start, you're going to need you might just need the corner of your garage in order to do that. But know that as your adventures in merchandise continue, you're going to need a much potentially larger space. And after 15 years of doing this, I've now got commercial premises with which to store all my merchandise.
And you've gained your garage back.
And I've gained my garage back. Hurrah.
So come, point number 3.
Point number 3, you're going to need to keep some form of record. So, either a Google Sheet.
Do you mean financial records?
Financial records, Google Sheet, Microsoft Excel. At the very least, you're going to need to keep track of money in, money out, because heaven knows at some point you might need to declare and pay tax on all this money that you're making. I'm not a tax expert. I pay an accountant to look after my business's tax affairs.
But that's because yours is trying to manage that with everything else. But to begin with, as long as they keep receipts and they are able to show money coming in and money going out, that should be enough, shouldn't it?
It's not difficult. Again, it's not difficult to get a Google Sheet, which is free, and to list and itemise your costs, your spending for goods and raw materials, and your income from the sale, those things. So keep records, people. Keep records.
Okay, so because we're a DIY, do-it-yourself music marketing channel, should I be tempted to do the merch myself?
To be.
I'm going to go out and do screen printing and a CD duplicator.
Let me tell you a
printer.
story, Greg. Back in 2007, when my current band first started, we thought we'd have the brilliant idea to screen print all our T-shirts ourselves. So we bought some blank T-shirts and we got somebody to make us a frame with which to try and make our own screen print. And all we ended up doing was we actually made a loss on the first batch because we ruined that many T-shirts.
I think that's one thing that people don't realise, because I got CD duplicator and a CD printer, automated one, and people they forget about that. There's waste.
Yes, yes, you run through a lot of blanks when you're duplicating CDs. So what I would suggest is research people who specifically make either band merchandise or companies that make promotional items for other business, and use those. Our lead singer of the band once wanted Frisbees, band-branded Frisbees one year, just because he wanted them. So I went to a company that just makes promotional items for businesses. You would not believe the amount of goods that you can get with your band logo on.
Oh,
so we had Frisbees made.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, Greg.
Gino doesn't remember that.
No, maybe they're collector's items now. I know at the time they didn't bloom and sell.
It does seem a bit completely adverse
one
to your
One
band.
thing I will say is that, and maybe we'll discuss this in the next episode, is that given time, as long as you still carry on being a musician, you do generally tend to get rid of everything, even if it takes years potentially, rather than a month. So that's the groundwork. Things to think about, things that you might not necessarily have thought about prior to. I thought rather than just going out and saying, right, let's make a load of band merch and let's just discuss that in an episode. It's all the things that you didn't necessarily know that you didn't know. In the next episode, we're going to cover execution, what types of band merch you should make, and the best practices to sell them both online and in person.
So there you go. So we'll be continuing our shopping experience next week. Until then, thank you for watching and see you next time.
See you on the next one.